Right.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Tom so
Second.
moves,
Second.
Fred seconds. Any changes to the agenda? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, first up, Chief, weather radio discussion.
So I just want to kind of touch base with our weather sirens and stuff that we have. If you remember back a few years ago, when they are up on the Methodist or the Trinity and Lutheran Church got hit with that tornado and stuff, some of the big complaints that we heard is that people didn't hear the sirens or sirens didn't go off throughout Outagamie County. And that's kind of when it first was being noted that the weather sirens are actually meant to be heard when you're outside. With technology and stuff coming about with cell phones and all the different alerts and stuff that we have, weather sirens might actually become kind of extinct at some point. And I guess that's where I present to you, how long do we want to maintain our stuff as far as the weather sirens go? Right now, up until this point, it's been fairly inexpensive. I would say on average, we spend about $1,000 to $1,500 a year to keep them up and running. But if one weather siren were to go down and we had to replace the whole thing, we'd be looking about $25,000 to $30,000 per siren to get them up and going again. I'm expecting this year that we've got 2 boards that we're going to have to replace and possibly a head that we're going to replace, of which we got a backup old head that we can use. So I'm guessing we're going to be spending around $3,000 this year yet to keep the sirens up and going. So I guess what I'm kind of presenting to you is to kind of look at maybe a sunset date for our repairs of our sirens, and maybe look at the beginning of maybe 2027, which is a little over 5 years out from now. And in the meantime, what we would do at the police department is start promoting this. Right now, I've gotten about 40 weather sirens from Outagamie County through a grant and stuff. And we'd like to start distributing those out to maybe some of the trailer parks or people that do not have cell phones with alerts on. Also, when we can start getting together and have festivals and stuff like that again, and maybe do some advertising over Facebook to have people come into the PD, get them signed up for the code red for Wapak County or Outagamie's alert system. If I go to a baseball game down and watch my nephew or whatever at the game, if the weather sirens go off, people ignore them. What I see them do is everyone pops on their phone, they hit the radar and they say, oh, we got 15, 20 minutes yet before we get a problem, so let's keep playing here for a little bit. And I think by getting the alerts over the phones and stuff is going to be modern technology and moving forward. Not everyone right now, especially some of the older people in our community and stuff like that have cell phones, but I'm guessing 5 years from now, because 10 years ago, almost no one had smartphones. So I'm guessing we're probably in that ballpark, 75% right now probably do have them. But the portion of the population that don't have them, maybe we can utilize some of the money that we would have spent on repairs to do something to get weather radios out to them instead. They may not be in our communities and have them with them all the time, but I've been around stores and stuff when the code red goes off before, and pretty much the whole festival food lights up and everyone's looking at their phone to see what's going on. So I'm not sure what your guys' thoughts are on this. Something that if we were going to do, I'd like to start promoting here soon. And I'm guessing that what would happen is if we kept the sirens repaired for the next 5 years, we will probably still have them in existence for 10 to 15 years total. So even after that 5, if we have a $500 repair, I think you still do it. But when we have a siren actually go out, we just let that one stand and we leave it alone, and that one's retired. So I guess I'm looking for opinions from you guys, seeing how you'd want to move forward with this or not move forward with it. Either way, we could still do the advertising for the code reds, hand out the weather siren or weather radios to maybe some of the trailer parks, or meet up with some of our churches and see if they know people that are in need of them. But I guess it's time to bring it to the table and start getting things moving forward one way or the other, and kind of go from there. I believe we probably have quite a bit of money right now, or some money at least in reserve. I thought the last time we checked it was 20 grand or so. Was that about right, Judy?
It's 24.
Okay. So there's enough to keep them up and going for a little bit, but instead of budgeting every single year for this, I don't know, looking for input from you guys.
Well, I think, Jeff, your analysis is perfect and running ahead. It's now running ahead because I know that code red, the county really pushes on their website. And I don't know about City Wapak, but do we have that on our New London Connect?
I believe we got it on all of our sites, including the PD. We've done a lot of advertisement here.
Because that is really slick.
I don't even know. I know we have money for 5 years, but even that seems long to me. I don't know anybody that doesn't have a cell phone. Or is when they're out there by somebody that has one.
Yeah.
I know when the tornado came through, my whole truck was lit up, and that was a 13-year-old kid in the back that had their phones that were, I mean.
Yeah.
I was down in Basin when the tornado went through July 20th of last year, and I don't remember hearing any sirens.
I've heard them every time.
Well,
Yeah.
the tough part about in London is because we're part of Outagamie County. So,
Oh,
like, you really, when you're in London and the siren goes off, you don't know whether to hit the ground
did you hear
or
it
to
last
stand
year?
there. Huh?
You hear it last
I
July?
was in the truck. I have a phone that,
Oh.
my phone actually lit right up. It was rough.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I was in church here what, 3 weeks ago or so, when they had that tornado watch out. And I bet you I heard 3 phones go off in church. So, I mean, the people in church got them, got their cell phones on. So the weather sirens, and I think they're,
And to
The
get-
sirens originally because of people, rural people, farmers that were outside.
That's what they're designed for, people that are outside. And
I don't hear, the noon one, I don't hear unless I'm downtown.
so, and to give you an idea of
I hear
exactly
one
what
time.
happens when they go off. So here in the city of New London, at the PD, we have the ability to trigger our sirens at any time we want because we owned all of our sirens. Outagamie County owned a bunch of theirs, but we were on their system. So if we wanted to, we could trigger ours here in New London at any time. If Chris Gregory saw a storm coming and he called down to the PD and said, hey, set the sirens off, they'd set them off. If, for example, in Outagamie County, if you were down by Appleton, until they get confirmation from the weather station, weather center or whatever over in Green Bay, that there is a tornado or there's the circulation coming, dispatch would not set it off in the past. But what would also happen is if something came up through, for example, let's say Fremont over towards Appleton, and Outagamie set off their sirens, it would also set off all the sirens in New London. So we could set ours off or they could set ours off. But when they set theirs off, it also triggered ours. So what happens a lot of times is people will hear ours go off and they'll just ignore it because it might be a storm headed towards Appleton. And you don't want those sirens crying wolf too much. And I think that's where the code red gives you New London's location versus the weather sirens. And I think
they
it's,
actually used to have police officers go sit around out in the country and watch to see if there was a storm coming, so they could call ahead and say, yeah, there's a tornado.
yep. And we'll still go do that. We'll sit up on Becker Road. We'll go out to the north side, the south side, and we mainly watch to the west,
Yeah,
so.
I think those things are dinosaurs.
But I like the plan that you laid out, Chief.
Yeah.
It gives us 5 years to kind of get used to this thing and particularly the promotion that you talked about. Let's get it out on cable 3 and our 9.99 and so forth.
If one would completely die though within that 5 years, are we still able just to shut it off?
We have the ability not to repair it at any time. Our city owns all of them now. Outagamie had owned one of them. That has been given to us as of last year. So we are now in ownership of them. We're required to maintain them. We would have the option that if one died to decide if we want to repair it or not. But like I said, they've knock on some wood here. They've been sticking around a long time, but they are old. Some of them, some are 25, 30 years old. And if not even older, some of them, but I think you keep repairing them at low cost, at least for the next 5. And then we decide if we're completely done or we want to do a little maintenance at a time. So I don't know if you guys want to move forward or how you want to move forward, or if you eventually want to bring some to council or.
Probably
That's
a
up to
good
you
thing to
guys.
bring to council. I think we should have the entire council input and also the publicity at a council meeting, that type of thing is good.
Okay.
So we could make a motion tonight to move forward with a sunset plan,
Yep.
like the way that Chief Sleater explained it. A sunset plan for our weather sirens.
Want to make that motion, Tom?
In 2027 is.
20, January 1st of 2027.
So I guess I'll make that motion of to move forward with a sunset plan for our weather sirens for 2027. Piggybacked with a public information campaign for our code red system and weather radio program.
I think if you put in there, unless one goes bad, we don't.
Right, unless there's a major repair in that time, then we may reconsider.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Fred had second the motion. Any further discussion?
Actually, Fred, Morak, O'Connell, Barrington, Dorsey, and Fauché can,
I'll second
thank you, make the motion. You can vote, but you can't make a motion.
Okay,
Sorry.
So, thanks, Dave.
anybody else has to second it, huh?
Dorsey already did.
All right.
Judy, we need to check that.
You
I got in
wouldn't have
trouble with It's like,
voted- You wouldn't have
Big
voted.
key.
I know, right? Just trying to follow the rules.
Like cutting out, right? Like
So
you said.
Morak,
Okay.
O'Connell, Barrington, Dorsey, and Fauché, and everybody can vote.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
What'd
carried.
you get for a second then?
David,
Dave.
Thank you.
thanks, Chief. All right, next audit presentation. Judy, you want to introduce Brent?
All right. On the screen up front, you can see Brent Nelson. Do you know about how long you've been auditing the city of New London? Alan was the partner previous who audited the city of New London, and then you took over for Alan, and you've been auditing for about how many years now?
I think Johnson Block's been involved for at least probably
10.
15 years. Or
Okay.
yeah, I was.
Maybe.
It was. I would say it's over 10. Me personally, I'd say, over 5. I've been involved. I just was promoted to partner here January 1st.
Well,
So this is my-
congratulations.
Thanks.
Very nice.
This is my first year being the partner. But yeah, Al's in a partner emeritus now, so he's enjoying some retirement time.
Well, great. All right, then I will let you take it away from here.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So for tonight, I guess I have a PowerPoint presentation that I saw went out with the Finance Committee's packet. So was thinking I could touch on that. And some years I go through it in detail. Some I kind of breeze through it. I don't know if there's any preference from the committee. If I go through that PowerPoint, I can share my screen.
What are you guys thinking?
Sure.
Would you prefer? Okay. And you did get the audit and the management letter. I sent those separately so that they wouldn't get mixed in everything. I just thought that would be easier for you guys to take a look at the management letter and the actual audit. A lot of times, Brent will put together this presentation and it's just a summary of the audit, because if we went through the audit page by page, we'd be here until midnight. And I think you'd all be sleeping, but so he is just going to use his presentation. But if you have any questions as he goes through it, he'll be glad to answer those, or I'll be glad to answer those. Or if there's any questions you have from that letter or the audit itself, please feel free to ask as we go.
Now, can everybody see that my screen with the PowerPoint?
Looks good.
Okay. Yeah, as Judy said, my plan this afternoon tonight was just this PowerPoint presents a pretty high level review of the 2019 audit. I'm here reporting on 2019 financial results. But yeah, I do have the full audit report with me. I have it electronically so I can pull it up on screen if there's any specific questions on any of that. But it is a 90+ page. The full audit report is about 90+ pages. So I was going to keep it pretty high level. Typically we come on site and work on the audit St. Patrick's Day week, which was right about the time everything with COVID broke out. So it was ultimately field work was canceled that week, and I know the city's festivities were. So a lot of the large majority of the audit was performed remotely this year. Wasn't ideal because it leads to a lot more back and forth. It's the most efficient when we're there and we can get things. So appreciate this city staff working with us, and it was a lot of emails and scanning, but we worked through it.
We did. At the end of the day, it worked out just fine. But yet, like you said, it seems to be just a little bit more efficient if you can actually visit the city and talk to us and ask us things in person.
Yeah, I'm actually at a school district right now. We're finally, we were doing remote auditing from March until probably June. We didn't really start getting out to clients again. So we're doing June 30th school audits, and it's really been great getting back out in the field. It's just so much more efficient. So I look forward to returning to that. But yeah, we worked worked through it this year, doing with a lot of the remote. It wasn't just New London, it was across the board. So yeah, I'll briefly go through these. Here reporting on the 2019 audit, we issued an unmodified opinion, which basically we feel the financial statements in the bound 90+ page report are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in all material respects. Before we issued the final report, management reviewed and approved the draft financial statements and any adjusting journal entries we provided. In conjunction with the audited financial statements, there's a separate audit communications document that Judy alluded to that was sent out separately. So I can touch on that later if the committee wants to as well. I have a copy of that with me. Just some high level 2019 financial highlights. Overall, city governmental funds, the city has a number of different governmental funds. The general fund is the main operating fund that increased 126,000. Capital projects decreased 81,000. Community cupboard decreased almost 200,000, and that was as a result. The city's been transferring those food pantry services, or the transfer has been completed now. But that ended up that transfer out showed up as an expense on the city's audited financial statements. The library and museum fund balance increased roughly 52,000. I know they were doing some fundraising in that fund for some improvements there. Another fund, the environmental TID, increased by 15,000, almost $16,000. And then the community development fund increased about 37,000. So that community development is loans. So there were some large loan repayments. So those were the funds that changed a lot. The city has multiple other funds, I'd say over 10 plus governmental funds. So those were the ones that changed the most significantly. The general fund on an overall basis had positive budget results. Actual revenue is more than budget. Actual expenditures less than budget. So good things there. During 2019, the general fund transferred 368,000 to the capital projects fund to contribute toward their capital projects and increase the capital reserve. So that's the general fund without that transfer would have increased more, but with that transfer out to the capital projects fund, even with that, it increased 126,000.
And this committee makes a cognizant decision if we have additional revenues and/or saving and expenditures to push those dollars from year to year into that capital fund. So that's why you see such a large transfer from year to year into the capital fund.
Shifting gears a little bit to the utilities, the electric and water utility and the sewer utility show up as completely separate funds. They're self-sufficient funds. Electric and water increased its net position 125,000. The sewer utility increased 146,000. The sewer utility increased 146,000. That increase is actually down a little bit from what it had been in the prior years. With the debt issue, there was a large debt issuance in 2019, which came with some increased interest expense, some debt issue costs. And then the sewer utility also chipped in for some water utility extension costs. So it's still a positive 146,000 increase in that position, even with all that going on. Slide 4, just looking at a 5-year trend and looking only at the general fund balance. 2015, 12/31/19, December 31st, 2019 is the far right. So this is the 5-year trend. At the end of 19 was 6.2 million in total fund balance. There's different classifications of fund balance. There's unassigned, but then there's things like restricted, assigned, committed fund balance. Total general fund balance though is roughly 6.2 million. That spike in 2016, 2017, that spike up, a TIF district closed in 2016, which led to some additional revenue coming in, one-time revenue coming into the general fund during those years. The general fund in 2018 and 2019, as I mentioned, made a large transfers to the capital projects fund. Overall, general fund unassigned fund balance was, of that 6.2 million, unassigned fund balance was roughly 3.6 million of that. And that represents 53% of 2019 general fund expenditures. So, and that's, the city has a fund balance policy where that should be above 25%. So the city was at 12/31/19, the city was in accordance with its policy. Just looking briefly at, looking solely again at general fund revenues. So yeah, so this is just the general fund. So things like the wheel tax, other revenues specific to other funds are not included. So the wheel tax shows up in the capital projects fund. So the taxes for the general fund is exclusively property taxes, payments in lieu of taxes, things of that, mobile home taxes. So things like wheel tax are not in this comparison because that shows up in the capital projects fund. But here's a 3-year look at what the general fund revenues have been for the last 3 years. All in all, you know, the breakdown of the biggest piece of the pie is taxes, 44%, followed slightly by intergovernmental at 42%. The breakdown of revenue as a total didn't change much year to year. Property tax has been about the same percentage of total for the last 3 years. Interest income has some swings, and that goes hand in hand with change in market value. So for 2019, the market was doing really well. We'll see how 2020 looks, but that includes some changes in market value of investments. Special assessment revenue in 2017 was higher than 18 and 19, and that largely was attributed to some of those, the recycling carts getting placed on the tax roll. Just a couple things that I'd point out there.
I think a significant thing to talk about also with our revenues is how dependent we are on shared revenue, which coincides directly with why we want to see our unassigned fund balance at the level that we have it at, especially in the kind of times we're living in right now. So looking at this, you can see 42% of our revenue, well, a great portion of that is dependent upon the state. And we know the state of the economy today. So, and all of the other revenues like the, you know, parks and rec and those program revenues aren't as detrimental to us as those that we count on from the state. So this is going to be interesting going into our not next year budget, but the 2022-2023 budget to see where these shared revenues go.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, shared revenue is a big chunk of that intergovernmental revenue of the 2.7 million there. The state intergovernmental revenue was up a little bit in 19 versus 18. I think that was mostly street aid. Street varies year to year based on a 6-year rolling average of expenditures, I believe. So that isn't always consistent. Shared revenue has been pretty steady for the last at least 5 years. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that changes.
Yep, and the expenditure restraint, about 100,000 of that, then it depends on how many communities actually are able to get the expenditure restraint, and that one fluctuates a little bit from year to year too. Excuse me.
Maybe I'll skip over some of these slides. General fund expenditures, just another 3-year trend looking at the expenses on this side. Couple swings that caught my eye. I just noted in general observation, general government was up year over year, 2019 versus 18. There was some staff retirements that happened in 2019, which tends to bring more expenses because there's employees are entitled to some sick leave buyouts. There's some things that get paid out upon departure. So I know the general government function had some retirements in 2019. Likewise with public works increase in expenditures. There were some staff retirements there. And then also there was the city made a change in how it started utilizing the director of public works accounts. Chad's time is in 2019 was split being split between public works and culture and recreation. So there was some differences in allocation with some changes in job responsibilities there. And then the transfers, the very last one, transfers I mentioned was really high in 2018, about 1.3 million. A lot of that going to the capital projects fund. But then in 2017 and 2019, there were also some transfers to the capital projects fund as well. Just some long-term debt of the city. So this is a beginning, the far left column, beginning of 2009, long-term debt. Increases would be any new debt, and then decreases the payments. Governmental activities, that would be the general fund, the capital projects fund. That's that main heading. Then the business type activities is the utilities. So water, sewer, electric. The general fund did not have any new debt in 2019. There was a little over $3 million debt issue in 2018, but no new debt in 2019 in the government general fund or governmental activities. Business type activities had a large borrowing in 2019, 7,545,000 right here. That was split between the water and sewer utility. About a little over $5 million, about $5.1 million of that went to the sewer utility. So otherwise, total revenue bonds, 18,655,000 in the utilities altogether. The only thing I'll mention, yeah, compensate. I mentioned there's some sick leave buyouts or upon employees departing from the city, departing from employment. That's we record that as a liability within the compensated absences category. So the city employees would be up in governmental activities, and then utility employees is down under the business type. So we accrue that for certain financial statements. We record a liability for projected payouts for city employees upon leaving the city. The state of Wisconsin has a debt limitation as limits how much general obligation debt the city can issue. At 2019, that was roughly 20.3 million. The city had debt outstanding of 8.6 million. So there was capacity there that the city could issue more general obligation debt if it felt it needed to. I'm not recommending that, but there is some capacity there if the city wanted to issue more debt.
We'll be talking about that next month. Or a little bit more, actually tonight too.
Just, I guess I'm just overall concluding on the financials, healthy fund balance, a lot of borrowing capacity should the city want to move forward with issuing some more debt. During the course of the audit, received full and complete cooperation from city personnel. I mentioned a lot of our audit was done remotely, so we appreciate everyone being so responsive to our emails, phone calls. So, even I think we made the best of a kind of a rough situation this spring and to work through everything. Thanks for letting us be of service. Did the city, or any questions, I guess, on the PowerPoint presentation?
Questions? Doesn't look that way, Brett.
Otherwise, I can touch on some of the audit communication documents, or if we want to, do we want to go through some of those items in the committee, or is it?
You guys, did you take a look at them?
Dave could translate
Anything
that.
standing out to you, Brent, we should talk about in the audit communication?
Yeah, I can. Why don't I bring? I was just going to bring that on screen, but yeah, the audit communication talks about just kind of general recommendations or things that caught our eye, just not necessarily findings, but just things that, why don't I'll bring that on screen here. bear with me. So yeah, I think this went out to the committee, but yeah, a lot of this is standard communications. We do have, I think the pages that get the most attention are kind of our general comments. So we did have a comment. I probably need to share my screen again. Can everybody see that? Okay. The sewer, I threw in a table about the sewer revenues really went up. I think that was in anticipation of the borrowing that happened in 2019, that the city increased its sewer rates in anticipation of those revenues, or needing those revenues to make those extra debt service payments with that $5.1 million of debt issue. So the sewer revenues, I think it was a two-step phase that those went up, starting in 16 and 17, and those have basically steadied off now here in 2019. So I don't know if the city is anticipating any other. I think part of the sewer revenues, there's a large customer that I think was no longer in business, and then the rates and in anticipation of the new debt borrowing.
Correct. So we're going to take, in conjunction with the sewer or on the electric and water utility, we take a look at that rate every 3 years. And I'm thinking we're up with that new rate study again next year. And we actually might have you guys take a look at it for us. We're thinking maybe it'll be a little cheaper since you do our audit. So I'm probably going to do a RFP to see what the cost would be for you folks to also take a look at that rate study. So every 3 years, we will continue to take a look at the sewer along with the electric and water and make sure that we're keeping pace with the expenses within that fund. We also thought, Chad and I were visiting the other day a little bit, and one of the things they look at when you're bonding is that fixed rate, and we are of a smaller number than a lot of the communities around us. Also, when you bond, they like to see that those fixed dollars are coming in because they know that you're going to see that revenue instead of the variable rate. I guess when you're a consumer, you'd rather see the variable rate because then you're paying for what you're using. But when you go to bonding, they like to see that you're seeing that fixed stream of income. So we were talking about maybe bumping up $1 again on that fixed rate side. I'm going to take a look at that as part of my budget process. I always look at the expenditures and revenues and kind of see where we're at. And that's why you saw that little bump from 18 to 19, because we did that dollar increase on the fixed side. But yeah, we're constantly monitoring and keeping track of that rate process.
Yeah, that is something we look at, Judy, for some of our clients. So yeah, if that's something you're interested, we could certainly give you a quote for what it would be for us to take a look at your rates. Yeah, another comment here. I mentioned the environmental TIF had an increase in fund balance in 2019 of about $15,000, $16,000. So that TIF district is coming to the end of its life. It won't be open. And I appreciate Judy, you sending me that, forwarded me that message from the state of Wisconsin, that TIF website. It sounds like that TIF cannot extend. That was my understanding. Is that correct, Judy?
Yes. So I did send a message off to the state because Brent thought maybe there are a number of TIF districts that they've allowed to extend the life because they're not paying themselves back, and that is not ERTID. So yes, that was the correspondence back from the state. I was kind of hoping when I sent it out, crossing my fingers and my toes too, but no, we'll be closing that one, I think in 2 years, I believe. But like I said to you too, we never really anticipated that environmental TID to pay for itself. That's why the general fund actually took on the burden of paying for that to start with. So we were actually thrilled when we saw that Beacon Street cottages go up, down that development go up and start paying. As you saw, the increment jumped immensely from about $300 to $15,000. So that was a nice jump in increment that was unanticipated, but just a great asset to the city to that development over there on the Beacon Street project.
Yeah, so at the end of 19, the TIF district is showing that it owes the general fund $242,000. Basically, the general fund fronted those costs with the goal that the TIF would pay the general fund back. But with only having revenue in 2020, 2021, 2022, increments about 16,000 a year, the TIF isn't projecting to pay itself off. So if it ultimately does not, the general fund, I would see the general fund recording the transfer of, it could be upwards of 200,000 to cover the closing of that TIF.
Correct.
So.
Yep. So just everyone knows, I think he's trying to get you ready. So you're going to see that kind of like how we transfer money to the capital, you'll see a large movement of money from the general fund over the TIF district.
Right. Had another table on, this is similar to the table I had in the PowerPoint, but it's specific to unassigned fund balance, whereas the table in the PowerPoint was total fund balance. But as you can see, as Judy alluded to it, unassigned fund balance really didn't change at all between 18 and 19. So that large transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund really had there was a nominal impact to unassigned fund balance between years. So, and then also in these communications, we referenced some significant accounting policies on the horizon. So there's a new Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement that was set to be effective for 2020, but actually with the COVID pandemic, they delayed that to 2022. So it's less of an issue than we were initially thinking. So we don't have to worry about that one as close as we thought. So.
And I think the only thing that would affect us is our postage machine, and I'm thinking that's immaterial. So I'm not really sure how that one's going to affect us at the end of the day anyway, but who knows, maybe by next year we'll have at least something. You never know how the world changes from one year to the next.
So those were kind of our general recommendations.
Sounds good. All right. I guess that's it then, Brett.
Yeah, unless there's any questions for me or wanted me to go over
Nope.
anything more.
Any last questions for Brent?
Nice report.
Right. If not, thank you for your presentation. Looking forward to continuing to work with you, Brent.
Yeah, thanks. And I thought hopefully everyone, this Zoom, I appreciated allowing me to Zoom in tonight, and I think that worked out pretty well. So thank you.
Well,
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time, Brent.
Yep.
A nice audit.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
all right, let's move on then to the next item on the agenda. Ordinance changes to include ad hoc committees. You have a copy in your packet of the change. Basically, it's just adding any ad hoc committees to the committees that would get paid for meeting. Up to this point, the ad hoc committees were not being paid. So, for example, the committee that was set up to work with for a city administrator and so forth would not be paid for those meetings because it's an ad hoc committee. And so this changes the ordinance to say if ad hoc committees are set up, that they would be paid the same as finance or the other committees. So that's the recommendation. So is there a motion to go ahead with this change?
So move.
Mike makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
John seconds. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next item on the agenda, the Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund closure discussion. Judy?
Okay, so I figure it was time that I figure out how this closure is going to happen. And what I'm talking about is the Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund. So we used to be able to have businesses come into City Hall and we would fund part of their startup costs. Currently, the only loan we have outstanding is Tuffy Boats. I'm glad to see a lot of action. Last time I drove by there, there was a lot of boats sitting out. Yep. So he is our current only outstanding balance. I got a hold of a gentleman from the state. I sent off an email and I said, I need to know how this is going to work because we need to start moving forward and closing this economic, like what am I doing and how am I supposed to do this? So I just wanted to I got a hold of a gentleman named Mark Staff and he was phenomenal. He told me, or he talked me through how this closure happens. So we as a committee have to decide whether we want to pay the state for the Tuffy boat loan. So what happens is either we decide that the state is going to take over that loan or we're going to keep it in-house. So if we keep that and we pay the state for that loan, we're able to add that to the dollars that we can use for projects. So if we send them the money, also I said, well, what about the interest we collect? And they said, you can keep that. So they don't care how we get the money to pay them. So we could, you know, the wastewater treatment plant could help us pay for it. We can take it out of fund balance. We could take out a loan. He's like, it doesn't matter to us where you get those dollars from, but you send us the money. And then what happens is we send them projects and they have to go through the projects and approve them. But he gave me an idea of what those projects are. The 5-year capital plan sitting over there that I'm going to talk about later. But then Chad and I got together. So first I figured out, okay, what projects will they pay for? Not public, you know, generic public, because public projects, because we are at like 46 or 48 LMI, low moderate income through the city. So he took out and gave me a WAPACA and put them together. He said that's how they determine. So what is always approved is ADA projects, which we have quite a few of. Plus, if you want to do like a road project, they will come in and they will help us determine if it's an LMI area. So when Chad and I got together, we took a look at the 5-year projects and we're like, okay, there's a lot of ADA projects on here. And then we're talking about possibly going back here and doing some mill and overlay. And I don't remember how many city blocks, but we have about $400,000 in total. So we definitely want to get ourselves moving in the direction of getting, first they have to sign off on how much money they're going to send back to us. So I'd have to send them the financial data. Along with that, they want the projects and an explanation of what those projects look like. And then they'll put approval together of, yes, we'll approve this project. Yes, we'll approve. Yes, that's a good project. Plus they'll come in and help us determine that these are eligible. They think they probably will be, but they actually send out a survey and or come into town and talk to these people and somehow figure out whether they're LMI eligible. And we're thinking that at the end of the day, we could get $300,000 of mill and overlay done over here and about $100,000 in ADA projects in our parks and things of that nature. And we had that conversation about how we need to move forward in our ADA area. And this would be a great opportunity for us to use that funding. I'm going to suggest we pay out that Tuffy and we get those dollars included in that, because like the gentleman said to us, he said to me, he goes, well, even if you get half the money, it's that's $50,000 you didn't have before. So unless you think there is no way you're going to collect the money, and they have been paying on time now. And then when I drove by there, I saw there was quite a bit of activity. So I think he's really moving forward over there in his business. So my suggestion would be that you allow me to go ahead and submit along with Tuffy, and then they'll stamp how much money they're going to give us, and go ahead and let them determine if those projects are eligible. And then I would come back to finance next month. And I would say, okay, this is how much money they say we can get, and these are the projects they say we can move forward with. So I'm just asking for okay, yep, go ahead and start moving forward in that. We're not approving anything at this time, but then I can tell you what that dollar amount looks like, what the projects look like, and then hopefully have some kind of determination. Not sure they're going to get it completely done by September, maybe October, before we actually know that those projects are eligible. But he said, I would definitely get those projects over to me, and then we can start working on them and letting you know if they're eligible.
For sure, it's by January 1st or something we have to make.
Correct. That's when I have to have, and then we have 2 years after that time to spend it, to go ahead and get those projects finished.
Right.
We're talking doing mill and overlay. Do we have to do any I work over there? Would that be included? Or, I mean, we've got a lot of infiltration over here. I hate to redo the road if we gotta go underneath and check something.
A bunch of what's over here, the sewers have been replaced in the past. The problem was when they replaced the mains, they only replaced the lateral up to the property line. So the leaking part is property line to the house. So not underneath the street in most cases. So before we would actually do any, mill and overlays, we would obviously televise to just make sure there's not a leak somewhere. But Ben has told me that a lot of the mains in this area have been replaced, but unfortunately, instead of going all the way to the house when they did that, they only went up to the property line. So our section of lateral and main seems to be okay. The leaking part comes from property line to the house in many cases. So a mill and overlay should not affect that, but we need to discuss in the future, how are we going to fix the leaking on the private side of the lateral?
Okay, you know what, I mean, we seem to be having a lot of problem with I.
Absolutely.
And one of the discussions maybe at some point, whether we help them we've done that before, where we allow, we have a project, we're in there, we offer the opportunity for them to fix something, and then we fund it and they pay us back over time. It wouldn't be the first time that we've helped property owners through that process.
That's it.
Just a thought.
Judy,
Yes,
is Tuffy Boats in any kind of litigation? Have we looked into that?
I have not, but I will look into that. I will send that over. I will send that over to Earl.
That would be my only concern.
Okay. Okay. All right, I will look into that. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we're looking for someone to make a motion.
So move.
Mike makes the motion to go ahead for Judy to do this. Is there a second? Dave seconds it. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, next update on the 2021 potential Gold Cross subsidy increase.
Yep, I will take that one. Actually, Mayor Mark and I attended a Gold Cross meeting last week where they explained to us what the budget's looking like for them in the next year. The problem is their revenue has gone down drastically because of COVID. Number one, they cited that there has been a pretty much cut off from any transports from nursing homes, because the nursing homes are in lockdown. They're not getting in, they're not getting out. They must be having people come to the nursing homes to do any type of medical treatment. So the transports for that revenue has gone drastically down. And then on the other side of their revenue is the transports that are declined have gone down as well. So when ambulance is called out, sounds like in the past, they were right around a 15% decline, that the person would decline service to go to the hospital. He said they were anywhere between 15, and he said at times when they were 17%, that was a little high. Right now they're in the mid 30s, 35% for people declining to go to the hospital because of COVID. Everybody's freaked out that they would catch something. So their revenue has drastically gone down. So the Wapaka County Consortium that we're involved in, their revenue is partially from a municipal subsidy from everybody in the area. And one of these slides kind of shows in the who's all in that consortium. But then number two is the revenue from the transports, which has gone down. So this is the PowerPoint information they gave us at the meeting. Just want to kind of bring you guys up to speed. What they do is they budget the next year based on the previous year revenue, and they're a nonprofit, so they budget for a pretty much a wash on their expenses, but they also budget for a 4% margin. And that 4% margin, for example, in 2020, they were budgeting for an 89% margin or profit. And that specifically goes to capital improvements. So that money goes into the heart monitors that they got to have on and the ambulances they got to buy. So that specifically goes to that. And that margin, they said some years it goes down to 2%, depending on what's going on. Sometimes it goes up to 6%. And they base their capital expenses or replacements based on that margin. So again, in 2020, they were budgeting for a $10.32 subsidy per capita. So in New London, we would take our population, multiply by 1032. That's what we would pay for subsidy for 2020. What's happening, their revenue is going drastically down. So what they're seeing right now, they're expecting a $117,000 loss because of the revenue. Now, first of all, they told us they're not expecting to come back to the municipalities to make that up. They've done a couple things on their end. They've pushed back some capital projects and some other things to kind of absorb that. So they're just pushing back some of these projects for that loss. But you can kind of see instead of a 4% margin, they're at a negative 5.8% projection for 2020. So going into 2021, based on the numbers they have right now, to break even for expenses and to get that 4% margin back, they're looking at going from that $10 and odd cent subsidy to a $15.33 subsidy in 2021 to get back to even. Now, they did say a month ago they ran these numbers and that subsidy was looking at being about $15.78. And in the last month, the revenue has gone up a little bit. So the new projection is the subsidy is going down. So what they told us at this meeting was they feel at this point in time, unless something drastic happens, they feel that the highest subsidy would be a $15.33 subsidy per capita. However, they're going to crunch the numbers in the next 2 months again. And if the revenue projections are increasingly coming up, that subsidy would be coming down a little bit more for 2021. What this means for us, and it might be kind of hard to see, and I'll zoom it in. These are all the municipalities that are in that consortium. But the city of New London, we're pretty much the biggest municipality. In 2020, our subsidy was 76,000 and some odd cents from there. We're looking at going up to 114,000. So we are looking at over a $37,000 increase for that subsidy in 2021. And then you can see the other municipalities and everybody's in the same boat depending on what their population is and what that per capita subsidy would be. One thing they did, they were proud to show over the years is that their subsidy has gone down. So in 2013, the per capita subsidy was $13. And over the years, it's been slowly decreasing from $13 because of either population going up or the revenue going up from their calls. The subsidy has been going down to 2020 being $10.32. They did also compare that, for example, if in 2013 was a baseline and they just added a 3% increase standard every year, we would have been in 2021 at a $16.47 subsidy this year coming into 2021. And then they also kind of showed about what some other municipalities are offering. City of Brilliant, for example, Brilliant owns the ambulances, but they pay Gold Cross for the service. So basically running the ambulances, the Gold Cross pays the staff and things like that. Brilliant, their contract is set up 3% every year. Goes up every year, 3%. And that's what Brilliant's at right now. Clintonville, they're at 25, Manuel's at 31, Fremont's at 10, and Fond du Lac's at 53 per capita. So they wanted to kind of give us some comparisons of, even though it's going up to $15 and some odd cents, there's some comparisons in other municipalities. So that's what Mark and I learned at the meeting. Everybody was like, yeah, we don't like it. We understand. The only other thing to do for Gold Cross would be to reduce the expenses, which would mean reducing an ambulance in the area, which we don't want to see. Because right now, it's pretty much at the cap. It's at the bare bone minimum, and I mean, Chief can pipe in with this. It's probably at the bare bone minimum that we want to see anyway, because if an ambulance is busy in Wapaka, they shift things around to kind of shift that coverage around. So if, say, the one in Wyawega is taken offline, we don't have that ambulance anymore. If you have one out for a call, that shift coverage majorly changes. And, you know, he's like, I can do that. I don't want to do that because I don't want to lay off staff. And I don't think you guys want that to reduce the coverage, but this is what we're in right now. We're not having the revenue from the ambulance calls like we have a year ago. So that's what we found out at the meeting and want to kind of give you a heads up of what we found out. So not what we want to hear, but I guess that's just one of the other realities of the COVID situation today. So any questions with that? I mean, it's pretty.
Mike? They look at this every year, so is there a possibility that next year this could drop down? Because
Yes, they did say they would look, we look at it every year. So if all of a sudden something drastically changes and the revenue goes up, you know, that in 2022, the subsidy would be comparison of what the revenues are. And the question was, well, are you going to refund us if you get a bunch of revenue all of a sudden? And they said, well, we're taking $117,000 loss this year. If there is an increase in 2021, they makes a little money, that'll probably balance their loss out. But they would talk about that, you know, in 2021.
Is there anybody that regulates them?
I'm not sure. You know, I'm sure they have standards that they got to keep, and you know, there's codes and regulations and standards. They're a nonprofit, so they're not making a profit per se. They have a margin for their capital expenses and their capital replacements. But they're in the valley. They're all over the valley. They're in the Wapaka County area. I mean, Gold Cross is pretty big in this area. You know, and they're not making a profit per se, a private profit for their organization.
yeah,
Any other questions for Chad? Tom?
we have to have a ambulance. We have no choice but to have the subsidy, as we sure don't want to own an ambulance.
Correct. Yep. Brilliant. They own their own ambulance, and look what they were paying. What was it, 25 or 35 or something? 32. So, you know.
And it could be worse with some of the depreciation on equipment down the road.
Yep. And that's where they put that 4% margin, so they keep up on their equipment. And he's like, you would not believe what an ambulance costs today. And I'm sure it's not cheap, and all the heart monitors and everything else they got going on. So what are you gonna do?
So we don't need to take any action tonight. Chad, just update.
That was just an update for you guys.
Very good. All right, let's move on. Then Finance Director's reports, Judy.
All right. Just grab the mouse here.
Here, I'll share the screen first, Judy, if you wouldn't mind. All right, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. For start out with the revenues, as you can see, right now, we run about 2 months behind, especially in Park and Rec. So Chad and I were visiting today. I said, you know, right now, revenues don't look too bad, but these are going to catch up to us eventually in about 2 months. And then I'll have a better handle of what revenue we may or may not be collecting here. I anticipate property tax revenue at 100%. We're very fortunate we don't collect that second installment, and the county settles with us. So we will see that one, as we know from Brent's presentation. One of our largest revenue areas is property tax revenue. State shared revenue at the 2.145 million will be coming in. In fact, we just received in July 300-ish thousand of that. We receive it in 2 increments, once in July and then the remainder in November. Highway aids I expect to come in full also. So I'm just keeping an eye on this. So far, so good. I'm at 47% in interest, and we're at the middle. I'm not going to say anything at this point. I'm just going to knock on wood. I can tell you that some of the investments I have come back to full value again, which I was pretty shocked at. So a lot of that, I don't know where it's going to go from here, but at this point, things are okay. That's all I can say about those investments at this point. So hopefully we see that remain steady. Any questions on any of the revenues? The ones that I'm really worried about, obviously, is the public charges for services. Those are the ones that we're going to see. The public charges for services.
Yeah.
So and we're already at 182,000. And part of that is the liaison officer at 30,000, and we'll see that one. That's a big one. So licenses and permits, I don't expect that one to drop too much. So I think we'll be okay. Any questions on any of the revenues? Expenditure side, we are seeing a higher than normal general government area here. So we're at 50%. So in total, you can see we're up at about 50%, but in each category, you can see some are above or below that mark. Administration is one that you see that is higher. We had a couple of things that are causing that. One is higher than normal expenditures in the city administrator category, and also in legal services. So those two are driving up those numbers within the administrative category. Insurance is higher than normal because we always pay our insurance upfront. So you'll see this one, and our dividends come in later in the year. So you'll see this one go over budget and then come back down into normalcy into December. Otherwise, I don't see anything. Cemetery, we had that retirement, and then we brought in a firm to do that work. The reason for that is because we had, I think, like 3 or 4 months of fringe benefits that came out of that budget. I can't pull them out of there. They have to stay in there. So you're going to see cemetery go up the budget this year. You'll see it be more normal next year. But because of that retirement, that is where the expenditure belongs. So that's where we're going to leave it. And that had to do with health insurance payments for Randy for those first 3 months. Otherwise, debt service, we just paid more debt service at the beginning of the year than we do the end of the year. I don't expect that one to go over either. Any questions on any of those expenditures or categories? Fund balance, capital projects, you can see where we pushed $418,000 of revenue into this. I think it's actually a good policy or practice for us when we have money that is remaining within a budget to push those dollars over to capital. We can never have enough money in this area in order to fix roads or parks or any of our equipment replacements. So I just think that's a really good practice. I'm just a little worried about this year and the amount of money that we may or may not have in any revenue or expenditure areas because of the COVID and how that's going to affect us. But just like any other business, we'll see how things pan out at the end of the year. Cable TV, as you know, Chad approved last night about $26,000, I believe, to be spent out of this. I will adjust this once I know exactly what those dollar amounts are. We currently have $282,000 sitting in that fund to be used specifically for those purposes. So I thought that was a great use of those dollars, and we're looking forward to seeing that technology as it comes through here in the next couple months. We have a little bit of money sitting in debt service. Boat launch, so there we spent a little bit of money on those electronic pay stations. I took that dollar amount out of there.
And
Yeah.
potentially the kayak project might come out of there.
Okay. Sounds good. And once we get some kind of a dollar amount or estimate, we can put that in there also. We do have somebody put us on for a phone upgrade because eventually the one we have is just going to disintegrate. I think it's been in the offices so long. The technology wise, we hardly have anyone who wants to come in and work on those phones anymore. So we've been putting in money aside to replace those eventually here. I also updated the downtown.
Back in telephone, we have a rough estimate of what we're talking about.
I want to think it's 60 or 70. I think we were pretty close. So every year I try to put a little bit of money in here, and I think we're pretty close to what that expenditure may be when we actually see that happen. Kind of giving, Missy kind of has a handle on that area, and she talks to me every year about, okay, we're getting closer, and what does the dollar amount look like? So at budget time, I usually meet with her and we talk about that. Trails, that's specifically to be used for trails. We have the downtown facade plus economic development. I updated that to include the small business. I will update that as soon as I know exactly what was expensed out of there. We also have the Steel King commitment, 2 more years, well, actually 1 more year because we already paid this year. And then the facade program. So as we know more, I will update these as we go along. Retirement reserve, Brent talked a little bit about that. You can see we're fully cash funded for all of those payments. If we'd all leave and retire tomorrow, there is enough money sitting in that fund to meet our current obligation. And then Chief talked about the weather sirens. There's the dollar amount, the $24,000 he was talking about using in case we have small repairs that we need to do over the next 5 years. And then he'd come if there was a huge capital expenditure, but probably look at more retiring them if we would have that happen. And then some for specific purposes. We hold in trust the Hatton Stadium money, Cross 2 Park, the dog park, and those are meant to be used for a specific purpose. So we earmark them accordingly. And then we have our wheels tax. So we own about 57,000 sitting and there at the end of the year. That is specifically in our audit. So if you take a look at our audit, you will see wheel tax as its own line item. It was a request last year. So if you take a look at our audit and you're looking for the wheel tax, you will see it specifically listed under those designated funds as a request of the committee last year. I did look it up and it is there. And then he talked about a $3 million in our unassigned fund balance. And then our policy. And then I always include shared revenue because we kind of, you want to stay close to that because we never know from year to year where that shared revenue is going to come in. Any questions on any of those? All right, then an update on wheel tax. We are currently at 55,000. We haven't seen any high street or industrial invoices yet. So everything we have, we're still holding on to in the wheel tax area. And then our wastewater treatment, we're still at about $500,000. I'm assuming he's gonna finish that up in the next couple months here and we'll see that depleted down to 0.
There's still some work that Parker has to do on the Division Street project, streets, the inlets or whatever down there.
Yep. I have that set up in our accounts, in our books as an accounts payable.
Oh, okay.
So I set that up because we had the bonding. So I talked to our auditors and I set that up as an accounts payable at the end of the year. So that is not these dollars. That's set up as a payable at the end of the year. Yeah.
What Dave's referring to is the Beacon Street outfall has to get done yet, and we've been waiting for the river to drop, and
Not
the river's
really
got to
sure.
drop before we do
Right.
it. So
So it'll just sit there and wait until the project's done.
Are we holding up any reports to the state or whatever because of the fact that they haven't finished their work?
Nope.
Learn.
We're all compliant there.
Right.
And then I have my monthly list, if anyone has any questions on that.
There was a number 8, had a conversation with Phil Clausen.
Yep, and I was gonna talk about that again at the next meeting, but I can
okay.
bring it up now too. Nope, this is important. So Phil Clausen sent me an email, I wanna say a week or 2 ago, I think it was 2 Tuesdays ago that I talked about it at the staff meeting, that interest rates are at an all-time low right now for bonding. So he suggests that we sooner than later bond because he knows that we were looking to bond yet this year. So we actually talked again today and we talked about some of the projects on the list, and I kind of want to talk about that as we go into the committee of the whole meeting, what we're looking at. So anywhere probably about 2.5 million is what we're thinking at this point, and then some other projects, and I'll talk about that. But I think he wants to come before next month's council meeting and move forward. Also, the utility is going to do a refinancing at the same time. So he's saying that if we're going to be bonding, which we are, we need to get together what that list is going to look like and move forward with it sooner than later.
Should that word be may want?
Yes, that should be
Yes.
want rather than wasn't.
Sorry. I was probably in a hurry.
Judy just went to see who read the report.
That's right.
So
Good
Mike,
job.
you did that.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Brett?
does utility bonds for a project, does that affect our bonding limit?
It does.
They are not a separate corporation.
Only the sewer. Only the sewer, not the general obligation debt. So the only limit that applies with the electric and water is our sewer. So,
Railroad stuff.
correct,
Okay.
their bonding, not the actual general obligation does. It doesn't affect our limit. It does not.
Question. Good. All right, any other questions for Judy? Okay, well, thank you, Judy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Anything we've just haven't talked about or whatever? Any questions from the committee?
With any stretch.
Okay, questions from the audience? All right, then, I guess we're ready to
Move to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Mike makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? And David seconds. All in favor?
Right.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you much.